College football and high school football are back, and so are we. Welcome to the fourth season of Over the Middle, the best college football recruiting podcast around. I'm your host, Jeremy Crabtree, and I'm the senior recruiting editor for On3. We're brought to you by the amazing folks at Yurview, the home for the best live high school football coverage from coast to coast. If it's a top matchup in Oklahoma, Yurview has you covered. The same is true in Arizona, Louisiana, Kansas, and other corners of the country. Be sure to log on to watch.yurview.com. Once there, you can subscribe for access to all the top games across the country, or you can pick up a single game match for just $7.99. I'm excited about this year's game time schedule, especially since we're now covering games in the Wichita area, which me living up here in Kansas City, that's going to save me a lot of trips later on this season. All right. A lot has happened since we last visited. First things first, I got a new job. Yes, I am back covering college football recruiting with a new company called On3. On3 is your new home for the best college sports and recruiting coverage around. It's headlined by my boss, Shannon Terry, who founded Rivals.com and 24/7 Sports. And through the years, we've learned a lot from our experiences in digital sports media. On3 will take some of those best ideas we've learned, but the vision and the plan for On3 is immensely different than its predecessors. We're creating a company that will look unlike Rivals and 24/7's once we're fully launched here. But it'll have some of the coolest features that have not been seen around, a cool recruiting database. But most importantly, we're building it with the best people around. And one of those people is joining us right now for this maiden voyage on the podcast this season. I want to welcome in Gerry Hamilton, our national recruiting analyst for On3. And Gerry, we've done this for years before, but this feels different at On3. Talk to me about why you're here at On3.
Yeah, I left ESPN the last day in May. I'd been there for 8 years doing ESPN national recruiting and Under Armour All-America football game and camps. And, look, Jeremy, we came up with the same guys in this business, Shannon Terry and Bobby Burton. And when I first talked to Bobby about this opportunity, I know Shannon's always 1, 2, 3, or 100 steps ahead of the game, right? I mean, from a technology standpoint, from a vision standpoint in this business. But then when I really got into some of the details of On3 and where On3 was going to head, it was a no-brainer for me. I mean, doing this 2 decades, I'm just so excited about the team that we're putting together. Here at On3, Ivan Mazel, lead college football writer. Young guy Matt Zenitz breaks all the portal news. Amazing in the portal. And the portal is a big part of our business moving forward. Jeremy, obviously you came back to work with us again. And Chad Simmons came over from Rivals. And we have some great team sites. I'm also part of Inside Texas. We moved that site over to On3. So it made a lot of sense for me. But I love the challenge of On3. I love the team. And I can't wait till the fans and prospects see the database when that's launched in October. That's where Shannon's always been ahead of the game, and I can guarantee he's going to be ahead of the game again.
Yeah, no doubt. There's some really, really cool stuff coming. And you're wearing a lot of different hats right now there at On3, but one of the most important is working with Charles Power on rankings. And all right, let's be honest. Everybody says their rankings are the best, right? But what are you most excited about with how On3 is going through the evaluation process and explaining their rankings?
I think one of the big things, when Charles and I sat down and talked about this is, the number one thing in rankings, you can't be scared to be wrong. And look, Jeremy, you know this. We've been in this business 2 decades. You're wrong. You're going to be wrong. This is an inexact science. The college coaches are wrong in their evaluation. But to me, the key is to have an opinion. Put your opinion on rankings out there, and don't be scared to be wrong. There's nothing wrong with being with missing on a prospect. Sometimes, when you do this over the years, over 50% of the time, a top prospect that doesn't maybe pan out, a lot of that times it's off the field, it's injuries, it's things outside of football. The special players are special. Your top talents, look, I'm not going to sit here and say it's an easy job. It's not an easy job when you're looking at 3,000 kids every cycle, but your top prospects are pretty easy if you've done this a long time. It doesn't mean we're not good at what we do. We are, but experience makes this a little bit easier. But the biggest thing, Jeremy, again, is we're not scared to be wrong. And one of those positions we're going to take is we believe there's too many guys ranked as athletes nowadays.
Okay.
And I said it on an interview with Charles Power that'll be on the On3 YouTube channel. We're not taking a knee on this stuff, okay? We're going to have an opinion. We're going to project these guys and more guys to positions. There's going to be some guys. Travis Hunter's an athlete. He's legitimately first-round pick at corner, wide receiver, whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
That's a compliment to him. But we want to get into this projection more and not just take the knee on calling a kid an athlete.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right, because that's such a wide definition, and it's almost like a throwaway position. You just like, okay, well, we don't know what he's going to be because we're not the best at our jobs. We're going to throw him into the athlete position.
No question. And that's the thing we're not going to do is, look, there'll be some athletes because some guys legitimately can. I mean, be that. But we are definitely going to project guys more to positions. We're going to take a stand. We're going to tell you exactly why we think Marvin Jones Jr. is the number one prospect in the country in 2022 and Arch Manning's number one in 2023. And we're not going to hide behind it.
Yeah, I think we're going to. Since this podcast hits Yurview's audience, and Louisiana is a big part of that, I feel we're going to talk a lot about Arch Manning over the next couple of years, and we maybe can touch on him a little bit later here. But so our new jobs aren't the only thing that's kind of reshaping college football recruiting. All right, Oklahoma and Texas are leaving the Big 12 and heading to the SEC. We've had a few weeks to digest the news, talk to some prospects and coaches. So let's talk about the impact of this news on the Lone Star State. Gerry, help us kind of get our bearings for most of our career. You know, I've been doing this for age ourselves now, 20 plus years now. Right. Most of the top prospects in the Lone Star State went to Big 12 schools, but there's been a shift over the past decade where we've seen a lot of talent get away to Alabama, LSU, and obviously now Texas A&M has been in the SEC for the last decade. And they've had a lot of success under Jimbo Fisher. So why is playing in the SEC such a big deal for Texas high school football recruits?
Yeah, I always go back to when a kid is 10, 11, 12 years old, that's kind of their age of influence. And I know I was this way. And when you talk to recruits over the years, they're the same way. As, you know, you find an identifiable player, an identifiable team. And if you think about the kids in this 2022 class, in the 2023 class, what have they seen their entire young lives watching football? It's Alabama win national championships. It's LSU win national championship. It's Georgia play for the national championship. It's Clemson, which almost counts as an SEC team in the kids' mind because it's in South Carolina, win national championships. Then outside of those, it's Ohio State and maybe a little bit of Notre Dame. So that's what these kids have grown up seeing. The national champions, the NFL drafts, the award winners, your Heismans, Lombardis, all of it. It's been dominated by the Southeast Conference. And look, if you're a Texas and Oklahoma fan, you say, oh, that's just because of Nick Saban. Well, yeah, he's the GOAT, but the SEC has marketed their league and kept their kids home, which is the most talented region in the country, better than anybody's ever done before. And then when Texas A&M moved into the conference, and they really came into the conference with Johnny Manziel winning the Heisman, right? It was kind of a perfect storm, not for A&M, but for the SEC. It was a perfect storm. At the same time, Texas is dipping. And so that really opened the doors. And so how big is this for Texas and Oklahoma? It's huge when you consider all you have to do is look down the top 10s and 15s of the state of Texas the last few years and see how many of those difference maker players are going to LSU, Alabama, and Texas A&M with Jimbo started to get those too. And I really believe that pushed Texas to make this move sooner rather than later.
So you've been out on the road. You've been everywhere in Texas the last couple of weeks. What has been the reaction from the top recruits about Texas going to the SEC? Is it resonating already with recruits, or is this something we might have to wait and see in that junior class or sophomore class before it fully hits some of these guys?
You hit on it. I think it's all timing, right? I mean, the 2022 class in Texas, I believe, is special. Obviously, Jeremy, we talked about, we've done this 2 decades. Unbelievable class in the state of Texas. Texas A&M is doing quite well with kids in state in that class. And some of those top prospects, your 5-star Evan Stewart, your 5-star linebacker, Harold Perkins, those kids are going to go play in the SEC. So Texas and Oklahoma, really this matters with Texas on those two guys. They need to have a date for these kids in this 22 class. Yes, Oklahoma and Texas are going to play in the SEC in 22-23. If that happens, I think you're going to see some immediate impacts for Texas as long as they do their part on the field, which starts Saturday against a really good Louisiana team. But that's the 2022. Those guys need to hear in October, November, what's going to happen, because I really do think that's going to be a differentiator for Texas in those two recruitments. When you look down the road, the kids, I think, are more excited. There's less questions, but there's more excitement. I watched Converse Judson and DeSoto Friday in San Antonio, and John Tay Cook mentioned that in a little conversation we had about, that's an exciting thing to him as a guy who grew up wanting to play at Oklahoma and now probably has Texas at the front of his recruitment. So it's definitely resonating. The biggest question all the kids have, and I think the fans have, is when is this going to happen? It's obviously going to happen before 2025. There's no way that plays out. The question is Texas and Oklahoma playing 22-22, 23, or is it going to be 23-24? Because it's going to be one of those 2 years.
Yeah, this might be something that 8th graders get most impacted by the rate that this is going. So, all right, let's be frank here. We've touched on it that LSU, Alabama, they've done so well, and A&M's done so well in the Lone Star State. New coach in Austin there, Steve Sarkisian, has had an up and down summer. I mean, let's be honest, up and down summer. However, it looks like that they do have the potential for a top 10 class if things break the right way. Is this SEC card? Are they playing it heavily with recruits, and is it going to help them maybe beat out Nick Saban and Coach O and these guys in their own backyard?
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge in November if they can say we are playing in the SEC next year, even if it's just with Evan Stewart, who's the number 1 receiver in the country, because I believe Evan Stewart wants to go to Texas. He was a Texas commitment at one time, but he's not a state of Texas kid. Look, he's from Memphis, Tennessee. His mom was all SEC in track at Tennessee. That kid did not grow up in the state of Texas watching Texas and Texas A&M play football and grow up with all that talk. Mm-hmm. So he's a kid that sees the opportunity at Texas. He has 2 million TikTok followers. So NIL factors into this kid's recruitment, maybe more than any other football player in the country right now. He stands to make a lot of money. So that plays in, and he sees those opportunities at Texas. But it's going to come down to, again, when is this move going to happen? But I'll tell you this also, Jeremy, is with a kid like that, and a lot of these prospects, they're waiting to see what Texas looks like on the field. Yeah. I think the years of Charlie Strong coming in and saying, we're going to get this done, Tom Herman saying, we're going to get this done and turn the corner, none of it's come to fruition. If Steve Sarkisian puts a aesthetically pleasing offensive product on the field, which hadn't happened at Texas since 2009, honestly, it's been that long, then I believe you're going to see offensive recruits start to shift towards Texas because of Sarkisian. They know what he does offensively. He's got a great reputation in the passing game as a schemer, as a coach of quarterbacks. There's some opportunity there offensively for Texas to score late in this recruiting class.
Well, I'm curious for your take on this. I mean, we've covered this long enough, and we know the recruiting rivalries. We know Alabama, LSU. We know Ohio State, Michigan, A&M, and Texas have. You can write novels and novels just about how the recruiting rivalries have it's one of the best recruiting rivalries in the country. Is this going to make things even more fun to follow the next decade? Because I got to imagine this is going to heat things up for kids in the Metroplex, in Houston, in San Antonio. It's going to make it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason Texas A&M was not happy about this move. Because they held all the cards, right? They're ascending under Jimbo Fisher. Texas is plateaued as a 7-8 win type of program for the last decade. And so Texas A&M, for the first time since probably late 80s, early 90s, saw their opportunity and saw themselves ascending. And that's why this move, even with Oklahoma, but more so Texas, really got under the skin of Texas A&M, probably because they weren't told about it either, which is kind of another funnier conversation. But bringing back the game. The state has missed the game. I think it's the most ridiculous thing of all time that A&M and Texas don't play. I mean, can you imagine if Florida and Florida State stopped playing? Or if Michigan and Ohio State, it's just stupid to think about, right? But that's where this got to. And look, if you're A&M, no, you weren't going to play that game again until you were forced to play the game because you saw yourself with an opportunity. And now Texas realizes we need the game and we need the conference. I mean, let's be real. It's money, yes. At the end of the day, Oklahoma and Texas and the SEC schools are making a lot more money when you own the Texas TV market, and then they own all the Southeast TV markets. But Texas absolutely needed this move for recruiting purposes because they know they were slipping in state with top prospects.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And unfortunately, wish maybe I'm sure the Longhorn fans wish the new move would have been announced a little bit earlier because, as you've hinted at, this 2022 class, and we've written about a lot about it on 3. It's arguably the best ever. I mean, it's absolutely loaded. And if there's one storyline, if you're a Texas Longhorn fan listening in, what's the one name headline you have to follow until National Signing Day?
Yeah, it was since Steve Sarkisian came in, he's targeted speed offense. It's amazing in the state of Texas where you saw Art Briles recruit speed at Baylor so well that Texas is not. I mean, under the previous 2 coaches, they are not. There's too many fast football players not going to Texas right now. And so that is the theme for me. What's left in this class? I mean, they have a really good defensive line class. They have a solid class. But for Texas fans, it's speed at wide receiver. Evan Stewart and Brennan Thompson ranked number 24. That one looks like it's going to come down to an A&M Texas battle because Mama said, you need to stay home, right? I mean, at the end of the day, some of these moms say, you're not going 1,500 miles away when you can go to A&M or Texas. So A&M badly wants to win that one, knowing that they're not going to get Evan Stewart as of today. But Texas has targeted those 2 guys, and those are 2 huge recruitments for Steve Sarkisian. Look, his biggest win was Xavier Worthy when he got out of the letter from Michigan and then signed his papers with Texas and is probably going to start the opener Saturday. That tells you how much of a need for difference maker speed there is in Austin. That 6'1", 160-pound kid is going to start Saturday in Austin as an 18-year-old kid. But he is electric. Now he rolls out of bed and runs 4.4. So those positions, wide receivers, huge. And then the other one, Jeremy, not to get long-winded, Texas fans are big on offensive line. Look, there's been so many dozens of offensive linemen drafted high in the NFL draft. This 2021 class really stung Texas fans when Tommy and James Brockermeyer go to Alabama, the son of Blake Brockermeyer, UT All-American. That stings. That cuts at you pretty good, right? Then Donovan Jackson, who Texas led on at one time, ends up at Ohio State as a 5-star. So it was an awesome offensive line class in Texas in 2021, and the Longhorns pretty much struck out on the top guys. So that makes Devon Campbell, Cam Dewberry. Can they flip Kelvin Banks from Oregon? Those are some other big recruitments, but it's the offensive side of the ball. I think there's confidence on defense.
All right. The other angle of this SEC move is Oklahoma. And I know we have a lot of folks listening to us in Oklahoma because Yurview is huge in Oklahoma. And Lincoln Riley's done an outstanding job on the recruiting trail. And honestly, they've kind of pivoted more toward a national recruiting brand. So I'm curious how the SEC's impact is going to help Oklahoma. It might not be a help them in Texas thing. It'll help them, but it's got to be able to help them when they go knock on doors in Florida and Georgia, and maybe even when you go out to California with all the kids that want to go leave California and go play in the SEC versus the Pac-12.
Yeah, Texas fans jump on me on IT when I say this on Inside Texas. I'm not sure it doesn't help Oklahoma more, Jeremy. When you think about they're going to have a couple offensive line starters from the East Coast this year, Maryland. So when they've been recruiting those kids out of D.C., Maryland, dipping their toes in Georgia and Florida and some of those areas, they think of all those top schools those kids have to fly over to get to Norman, Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
And you're not going to win as many of those battles. But Oklahoma, because of their success under Bob Stoops, and now Lincoln Riley with multiple college football playoffs, multiple Heisman Trophy winners. They're a cool school in recruiting nationally.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to impact Oklahoma more than Texas initially because they already have the national brand and they already have recruiting ties established in certain areas of the country more so than Texas. And there's pressure in Texas to win in-state battles. So I think this helps Oklahoma a lot nationally. And it's not being talked about enough because Texas is the bad guy, right? The good and the bad. It's like I was talking to a college basketball coach in an AEU event in the Big 12. And he was like, can you imagine how bad it's going to be for Texas on the road this year? I said, and that's it. I said, Oklahoma kind of gets a pass on this stuff. The Texas is seen as the bad guy, right? But in recruiting, I think it helps Oklahoma more out of the gate.
Yeah. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the 2023 class. Yes, I know we still are a long year and a half away from signing day in the junior class, but the Sooners are piecing together. I've covered OU recruiting since 1998, and I can't remember a start like what they have put together here. And they're using it. They're using their national recruiting brand to start out of the gate with 6 early commitments and top quarterbacks. I mean, it is absolutely loaded class.
No, it is. And Malachi Nelson's our number 2 player in the country, number 2 quarterback in 2023 behind Arch Manning, big time quarterback. Look, I mean, it's one thing to go get a quarterback from California. It's another thing to go to California and get the quarterback USC wants in a class.
Yes.
When Graham Harrell's the OC. And so that's a huge win for Lincoln Riley. Obviously, they got a teammate, Malachi Lemon, committed. But going to Fort Lauderdale and getting Brandon Ennis is another big win. That goes to your point, Jeremy, is they've created a lot of momentum in 2023. And I think they've done so for 2 reasons. The talk in Norman is this is going to be the best team Lincoln Riley's had. And we'll see if that comes to pass, right? I mean, I like Spencer Rattler. I'm not sure I'm buying the hype yet because Kyler Murray was really, really good now, okay? But Oklahoma is going to be better defensively. This is year 3 of Alex Grinch in recruiting. So they have better talent on defense. They have bigger bodies on defense to go against the SEC if they get to that college football playoff game and not lose both lines of scrimmage or on the defensive line of scrimmage. So they've planned for this year. And I think getting Nelson early has allowed them to build momentum, talking to these kids about how good we think we're going to be. And now you have a quarterback in that 2023 class. And that also helps 2022 recruiting. I mean, it's not like it puts you over the top or anything, but it does help to continue the momentum. So what the Oklahoma Sooners have done, they've created the possibility to have a tidal wave of momentum, right? If they make a college football playoff this year and they come through and get to a title game, not saying they even have to win it, if they just take that next step and get to the national championship game, think about what Lincoln Riley and his staff have to sell on the road, and they're going to have a lot of kids helping them sell it.
Yeah, it's going to be, like you said, a tidal wave is a great way to do it because everybody's talking about OU right now, especially this underclassmen group, and could help with, like you said, 2022 could help with 2024. It's a good time to be let's just put it, it's a good time to be a Sooner fan because you can beat your chest about going to the SEC, but then also beat your chest about the success that you're having on the recruiting trail. All right, one last topic before we let you go, Gerry, and it's another something new, and the name, image, and likeness era. We're 2 months into it, and let's be honest, it's already reshaping the college recruiting world, both in football and basketball, and the ability to land endorsement deals and how they go through the decision-making process. It's being impacted, no doubt about it. You're talking to these recruits on a daily basis, both in football and basketball. So just 50,000 foot view here. How are recruits viewing the NIL?
Well, I think it's a little unreasonable expectations for the vast majority. I've said this before. I think there's going to be a small amount of guys, considering how many guys play. 2,500 kids sign Division I football every year. Maybe that number goes to 23 now with the portal, but let's just say 2,450 sign Division I football. The number that are going to really be impacted by name, image, and likeness isn't many. You're talking probably a couple hundred in each class, maybe, and that's maybe on the high end of really making money that's a differentiator for you, right? So I think the expectations are a little unrealistic right now, and that's okay. I think basketball guys are going to do very well.
That there because
going to Memphis, you saw the deal Kentucky. The news Kentucky released Friday, right before five-star Cason Wallace got off the plane in Lexington. So I think basketball, because it's a couple of guys really impact your team and your program more on an annual basis. Those guys are going to do really well. I think quarterbacks are going to do very well at your blue blood schools. I think one of the interesting things, Jeremy, we're kind of getting in the weeds on this, looking at it, but this, like you said, the 50,000-foot view. Let's say you're a backup quarterback. So Hudson Card's announced the starter at Texas, and Casey Thompson's the backup. But let's say instead of being a junior, Casey Thompson was a freshman. Mm-hmm. And I didn't win the job. We had a competition. I didn't win it. Do you really stay, or do you go? Yeah. If you didn't win that job at Texas, that means you're probably not going to end up being an NFL prospect, right? So do you stay the extra year to see what happens, or do you hit the door and go start somewhere, find that group of 5 school where you can be their NIL face of the program? Okay, my NFL dreams may or may not happen. Doesn't look great if I'm being realistic. Do I hit the door and try to go make some of that income now, or do you wait a year? I think you can't play immediately, but if you make the move immediately, you can already start kind of getting your deals together. Because you're going to be the most talked about player at some programs. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how much patience some of these guys have. And then my last point on NIL, which I think is a fascinating one, Jeremy, is it's something if you have a college coach that ever wants to come on and talk about this. But do you think it got harder to be a college football coach with name, image, and likeness? So say your starting quarterback makes $300,000 a year or more. The third string guard's making $0.
Yeah.
The second string guard's making $0. All your backups are essentially making $0. In the NFL, if Aaron Rodgers is making $30 million a year, well, the second team guards are making $750,000, $800,000 million a year, right? And the youngest rookies are making $300,000-$400,000. But you're going from money in 18, 19, 20-year-olds' hands to no money. And I think it's going to be tougher than ever to keep your locker room together, because they're younger guys. They're not professionals, but now they're being thrown into a professional world. And can they handle all of that? I think it's going to be very interesting down the line to hear college coaches talk about how much more difficult their jobs are keeping a locker room together. That's just the things that's not making the news, but I think it's going to impact what you see on the field.
Yeah, to 3 different points there. You hit the nail on the head with basketball. I mean, the basketball guys, they are if they're good enough, they're one and done.
One and done.
So you can see why a company would want to invest in them, whether it's a FedEx at Memphis, whether it's something else somewhere else like that. There is tangible reasons for a business to want to invest in a guy that's going to be in the NBA lottery next season. So I think you also hit something that's just truly fascinating to me. I talked to a recruiting coordinator in the SEC for a story I wrote last week on On3 about that locker room, what it's like when star quarterback makes X amount of money and the backup guy makes no money, or even what's it like when your assistant coach is making less money than one of your.
That's a great point right there. I hadn't even thought about that one.
So there's a ton of different dynamics in this, but the thing that most kind of concerns me is that we're kind of entering this wild, wild west world where we truly don't know what's going to happen with the NIL. It's impossible to predict the future, but there's going to be landmines. What happens when a school? Okay, we're not naive here. We know that schools are working with companies and trying to set up NIL deals and making tons and tons of promises, to these prospects. So what happens when a school breaks that promise and the $50,000 deal to sign autographs for the backup quarterback doesn't materialize, and that kid jumps into the transfer portal, and then he turns somebody into the NCAA? I mean, this just it blows my mind the amount of landmines that we could see going into this.
That's a great point, Jeremy, because there are promises being made right now. And I look, you can't come out and say which prospects have told you things, but if those promises fall through, these colleges better have the T's crossed and the I's dotted on this stuff, because they're making a lot of promises to get kids to commit. And if those promises are not followed through on, those kids can hit the portal and go play one time immediately.
Yeah.
And that can really affect your team. So these guys better be on top of their game. And to your point, I hadn't even really talked about this or thought about this. So Arch Manning, okay, and he comes from a great family, so it's not going to be a problem for Arch and his family, but he's going to make more than any offensive coordinator he plays for in college football. He will make $2 or $3 million a year in NIL, more than likely. He will make more than his offensive coordinator. Just think about that for a second. It's wild.
Yeah. Well, think about this also. These kids are basing their life decisions a lot on these promises that could end up being broken promises. And, recruiting's all about promises and trust and believing who you're believing on. But what happens when that broken promise happens and you've made a life choice to go to school X when really you knew school Z was the better decision for me? But hey, school X had an NIL deal that could make me some more money. I'm just hoping we're not looking 5 years down the road and see a trail of broken promises and kids that have just made horrible, horrible life decisions and picked the wrong school. But, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to happen some, and there's definitely going to be a lot of regret you hear about with some of those decisions. And I think more than ever, Jeremy, you better have a good circle around you in recruiting now, especially those highly ranked kids, because you're going to have more people coming at you, trying to get a piece of the pie, seeing an opportunity more so than ever. And I've talked to high school coaches about this everywhere I've been. You better have a good circle around you.
Yeah.
You better have 2 or 3 people you can really, really trust, because these kids have been are getting thrown into a cutthroat world now at 18 instead of 21. And they don't have any idea how many people will take advantage of them. And that's my biggest concern is I hope these kids have good people around them, because the last thing you want to hear about is a kid having a lot of tax liability and turning around and he has no money.
There you go. That's another thing. I talked to an SEC coach last week, and he told me it's going to make national headlines. It's going to happen. That the FBI is going to come knocking on somebody's door here a year from now. Hey, you made all this money, but where's our cut for it?
Right.
Or what happens when the guy decides to break a contract, and we suddenly have this 18, 19-year-old kid who signed a contract that, again, I was naive when I was 18, 19. I wouldn't have known what a breach of contract is. So there's those types of things. So I'm kind of hopeful. You pointed out the circle. I'm kind of hopeful that this maybe brings back the high school football coach or the high school basketball coach into the equation, because let's be honest, they're often the most wisest and know what's going to happen as part of this process. Let's be hopeful that happens.
Yeah, let's absolutely be hopeful that happens. And I'll tell you the other thing with name, image, and likeness, because you led me down this path. I don't know how to say this. I'm going to dance around this, but there's a certain name, image, and likeness national headline in football in the recent weeks. And the school went around the high school coach's back.
Yeah.
And did not tell the head coach about this until it was happening. And the college coaches also have to be very careful there. And I know that's a different situation, but especially in Texas, you better be upfront with the high school coaches on what's going on with the kids that are still in their program, because that affects their day-to-day, that affects their livelihood, and that affects their team. And you could have games that were supposed to be televised and then they're pulled. So there's a lot of things that are going to play into this in the future, but the college coaches, they have to be careful too with these high school coaches, because is it worth it to get one player and never be welcome back again? Maybe, or maybe it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, I don't know where this is going to head ultimately, but I think you got to be careful of your relationships.
Yeah, I see where you're going without saying where you're going right there. and those listening to the podcast that follow recruiting certainly can read between the lines and know exactly who we're talking to. So yes, we're entering the wild west. But guess what? It's truly exciting times, and it's going to make the next decade here with us working it on 3 even more exciting. And Gerry, I always love our visits, because I think you and I could talk for days about this stuff. And
yes, we could.
but this was a truly great conversation about the new world of recruiting that we're covering. And I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, part of that On3 is we're going to tackle name, image, and likeness. You're going to be able to see that on player profiles. It's never been done before. So for the fans out there, when this On3 database drops in October, I think fans are going to love it. And I know I love it, and I know you probably love what you've seen of it. And it's going to be really good stuff. And I'm looking forward to being part of the On3 team.
Yeah, and I'm excited just to see what storylines we're going to be covering, because it's I love writing about recruiting. It's awesome to be back at doing it, but there's just I always get asked if it's boring covering recruiting. Well, hell no, because it's something new every day, and each individual kid's a new situation. And now that we've got all these curveballs thrown into it, we're going to have the Big 12 reshaping itself eventually, it looks like, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. So
I've got another one real quick, Jeremy. I know we got to go. We haven't even hit on this with name, image, and likeness. If you were a high school graduate, high school prospect, wouldn't you do everything you can to graduate in December?
Yeah.
So you can start making more money. So it's going to be interesting to see. That's been a trend for years now. More high school midterm graduates enrolling early, but it had been for football and college purposes. Now it's going to be for money-making purposes.
Yeah.
Because if I'm playing at spring football and I have that Oklahoma uniform on, I can start making NIL money. So then that's another avenue that these college coaches they're going to have to navigate is your numbers, how many guys you can bring in, your 85 hard limits, all those things, because more kids are, once they realize the possibility, they're going to say, I don't want to be in high school past December. Yeah. What do I need to do to get out of here?
I think the NIL is a overarching. It's a good thing, but boy, it's gonna create some unexpected circumstances. I mean,
yes, it is.
I mean, even sitting out their senior years, and because I don't want to play because I don't want to hurt my ability. So there's that's.
Do we have a minute? Can I address that?
Yeah, go for that.
Okay, so there's a 5-star prospect in the state of Texas, and I was at his school twice in the last few weeks. And somebody in his circle suggested not playing this year and opting out. And look, I told the kid, I said, here's the issue you have with that. I said, if you want an opinion from the outside, every game you don't play by choice hurts your brand. And if you choose to not play as a senior, that can hurt your brand. And I said, so you got to be conscious of those things now. It's one thing if you're Jamar Chase and you've done everything in college and you had a foot injury in high school and re-aggravated it, that's one thing. But if you're branding yourself every Friday night you play, you have a chance to make big plays, show your personality, grow your social media following. If you sit out a year, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think you're going to see less opt-outs for senior year high school. So just the thought of it.
Let's just hope so. That's mind blowing, because let's be honest, that's the best time of your life is when you're playing high school football with your buddies and friends, because you're never going to get that experience again. So yes, it's I keep going back. It's going to be the wild, wild west, and I'm just excited and curious to see what the next decade brings, because it's going to be nuts.
Yep, and all the fans will be at On3 talking about it with us.
All right, Gerry. Thank you for joining us here on this week's edition of Over the Middle. Once again, I'm your host, Jeremy Crabtree with On3, and we can't do this show without the support from the great folks at Yurview. Yurview is your home for the top high school football matchups from Arizona to Rhode Island and everywhere in between. Head over to watch.yurview.com and check out some of the great matchups slated this week. I'm really excited for the Centennial Chandler game Friday night in the Phoenix area. So much talent in that game, but that's not the only big game this week, and there are more on the way that we'll talk about throughout this season. Thanks again for joining us on Over the Middle. God willing, we'll talk to you again next week.